Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I know we've got people joining us from everywhere and really appreciate it if you've taken the time out of your day to join us live. As always, these recorded, so looking forward to getting through some information about our cost benefit report at Atlas Live. My name is Victoria Lawrence. I'm joined by my host, Amanda Young, as well. Hello, Amanda.
Hello, Victoria.
How
And
are you today? What's happening?
we're standing in the same paddock, so we should be discussing this live, but here we are. Look, it's a lovely sunny morning here in Tamworth, and Victoria, you're over in Perth, and
Yep.
just echoing Victoria's thoughts, it's great to see so many people jumping in and joining us from all around the country, and looking forward to jumping in and running through the importance of cost-benefit analysis when looking at soil carbon projects.
Yeah, sounds good. I know we are on opposite ends of the country for most of the time, but virtually we are in the same paddock, and I believe that's your paddock. So thank you for having having your beautiful cattle on show for us in the background here that we can see. So thanks, Tamworth. Appreciate it. Yeah, as Amanda said, I'm over in the west. I'm over in Perth, so we are on different sides of the country, but we are part of the One Atlas Carbon Maya grazing entity, and really appreciate, like we said, taking the time to join us today and looking in our cost benefit reports at Atlas Carbon. So our agenda is what we'll be doing a brief introduction if this is the first time that you are learning about Atlas Carbon or you've heard about Maya grazing. Welcome and appreciate you joining us, and we'll do a bit of an introduction about the two parts of our company. We'll then look at what is a cost benefit analysis. So I know with carbon projects, it is a very new space. There are a lot of moving parts, very dynamic, with things changing quite constantly. What we strive to do at Atlas is to really bring you the latest information all the time when it comes to the soil carbon project space and the emissions reduction fund and the carbon credit schemes, all of that's part of what we do at Atlas. But today we'll be focusing on our process and what we call our cost benefit report, which is really the first step in our process, and looking at, well, how does your property actually stack up when it comes to what the potential is for a proposed carbon project with us. We'll then do some Q&A. So if you do have any questions, there is a Q&A box on your Zoom screen. So just type your question in there and we'll get to them as soon as we can at the end of the session. And if we can't get to all of them, we'll endeavour to get back to you as well. First of all, should we jump in? Do you want to do a quick overview of who we are, Amanda?
Sure. So as it says there on the screen, we are a carbon project developer. Atlas Carbon as a brand has been around for a bit over a year, but actually we've been in the soil carbon space for longer than that. Maya Grazing has been around for around 8 years now. And with Maya Grazing, we have come to really understand and know the practices that drive soil carbon sequestration, which is essential in a carbon project. So understanding how grazing management drives that is what Maya Grazing is all about, and now we have Atlas Carbon as well. So as a carbon developer, we work with farmers to run soil carbon projects that work alongside their production of their core business. So our soil carbon projects aren't at the cost of production, they're about how to build soil carbon using good grazing management, while continuing to focus on the productivity and profitability of your grazing business.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I suppose a good segue to that is looking at our process and understanding why we do what we do, which is all about making sure that yourself as a producer, as a potential soil carbon project owner, and us as Atlas Carbon are all on the same page in terms of the things that are required during that project period. So initially, if you're interested at all to talk to us, and you can always come and talk to Amanda or myself about this if you have any questions at all, but an expression of interest. So if you are interested in all and seeing, what about my property? And we know, there can be constraints in terms of size and location and scale as well with rainfall. So we look at that and say, yeah, this is probably a good property that might be potential to go through to looking at a bit deeper, or whether it's not quite suitable in the range for a potential project. So we can help you with that in the first instance. After that, we can do what we call this property questionnaire to then set up for this cost benefit report. So we then gather some more details from you about looking at, the current infrastructure, your livestock history of the property, that sort of thing, to get a bit of an idea of where it lies in its current state. And a big part of that is establishing, is there room for additionality? And what all carbon projects require is this newness element, which is really about, we need to be doing something quite different and new on the property to actually make sure that we qualify for the soil carbon project requirements. And then, you're doing practices that sequester more soil carbon than your previous processes. So that all flows into our cost benefit report, which we're going to go through today. We'll show you this 6-page report, and then what comes after that is then getting out on farm and the farm visit. And we'll actually do a session like this next month, getting into detail about that farm visit, but that's really about ground truthing a lot of what we think in this cost benefit report, which is an estimated desktop analysis. So there's only so much we can do from a desktop without getting out on farm, but it's really about digging a bit deeper before we say, yep, it's worth coming out to really get to know you, get to know your property, do some soil sampling, some pasture sampling, and get everyone on the same page with the state of the nation, I suppose. Any comments about that, Amanda, or is that about right?
Yeah, and it's a great summary as always, Victoria. It's an interesting thing to see this on the page here, and as we go through and look at a cost benefit report that we do produce, which is the focus of today's session. Usually as farmers, when we're making decisions about, am I going to put a crop in, or am I going to buy some weaners and take them through to feedlot weight, we don't need to go through such a long process of decision making. The costs are fairly known within a fairly existing range. The benefits can also be calculated, but as Victoria was saying at the start of this webinar, this is quite a new space. It's developing quite quickly, but also there are a lot of variables. So there's variables in every farm, whether you're doing a soil carbon project or you are growing out weaner steers to a feedlot weight. But there are just 4 when you're doing a soil carbon project. It's pretty known how long it takes to put a kilo, 50 kilos or 100 kilos on a steer, and what's involved in that and what you're going to sell it for at the other end. But with a soil carbon project, we do get asked, well, how much money can I make per hectare? And the answer is it depends. And this is how we work that out, because the variables are industry, things that sit outside your farm, things like the costs and benefits that we'll see in here that we're going to get to in a moment. They're fixed costs, things like baselining and that sort of thing. They're not as variable per property, but things like your rainfall and your history of management, your current grazing management, your water infrastructure, your elevation, the temperature. Every farm is different. So with a soil carbon project, that becomes an even more detailed analysis to really work out, well, how's this going to look like for you over a 25-year term? And it's a big decision. When we're making decisions whether to buy steers or put in a crop as examples, they're seasonal decisions. This is it's a significant decision, so it warrants a significant investigation process. So we'll jump in and have a look at what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is important to remember the reason that we do this due diligence beforehand is for that very reason, is because of the nature of these decisions. And with the industry being so new, people are naturally going to be a bit nervous about it. So we want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to gather as much data as we can before that decision is made, rather than just taking a stab in the dark and saying, yep, looks all right on paper, let's go for it. It's all about making sure that we're getting on farm and ground truthing a lot of what we think here as well. So that being said, this report that we can pull together for you after you've done that initial questionnaire and given us some more data about the property is a 6-page report. As mentioned before, it is a high-level estimate. We do have a few different cases we can look at in terms of your low base and high case scenario. But we really are trying to split out the different elements of what's involved. So looking at, those different costs, where do they fit in? What are some standards that we know to be true, and what are some estimates that we think, based on what you've told us, where we could find that additionality and potentially how much it could cost, along with the benefits as well. So what we do a bit differently at Atlas is we both look at production and carbon as well, because we know they are inextricably linked, and we're here for helping people through that process of not only being able to do all the carbon services side of things, but actually that core business of the grazing business, and really optimizing that, and what might that look like as well. So the first part of this report is this property data. So we've got a bit of a dummy report here for a farm that we've called Lockwood Village. And you can see it's in Queensland with 700 mils, 2,300 hectares, and current grazing management. So how long has the current grazing management process been in place? And that's obviously important for knowing potentially how much carbon has already been sequestered, and where can we go from there? What's the capacity to improve on that? Stocking rate, current inventory and DSC, and what enterprise it is. So that information then gives us some of these key assumptions. So these fixed assumptions like your annual rainfall, temperature. We look at potential carbon project area. And so that's brought down from 2,300. Do you want to explain what that is a bit about, Amanda?
Sure. So essentially, a property in its entirety may not be suitable to put in a soil carbon project. So in this case, 2,300 hectares total, but 2,000 hectares would be suitable for inclusion in a carbon project. And some of the areas that could get excluded are the area around the house paddocks, but you also might have some thinner soil, some gravelly ridges, just some soil that's not suitable. You might have areas that are have more extensive tree cover that make it quite challenging to get a rig through to sample. So essentially, we are just pulling it down to an area that can very effectively sequester carbon. We don't want to include areas in a project that aren't going to give you a good return on the investment involved in setting that up for a soil carbon project. So we're choosing the right land and making sure we've got just the stuff that can make the most money for you.
Yeah, and there's a few assumptions we put in there for pricing as well. And I know the live weight price has been a bit up and down the last year or so. And carbon credit price as well is fluctuating, but this is sort of where it's sat over the last few years.
Yep.
So let's jump into this first. Now, this is the big graph, Amanda, that sits right at the front page of our report and looks at everything that we've got in the report as a whole. So it's not the most, should we say, easy to understand at first graph. So we might just go through this in a bit more detail. As I mentioned before, you can see in the top table, we've got estimated benefits, estimated costs, and net benefit. And for each of those, it's per hectare, per year, and 25-year total, and then broken down further into a low, base, and high case scenario. So that's us saying, look, this is where we think the potential sides of the equation are, and then we will focus on this sort of middle range base case as well. One of the really important parts, I think, looking at this graph to start off with, is this break-even point. Once we get, that break-even starts pushing out past that 5 years. So you can see for each crediting event, so each 5 years, you'll resample your carbon estimation area, and that is what will be assessed in terms of where your carbon position has landed. And so for each of those 5 years, you can see where that carbon revenue green bar sits. And if we are pushing that break even past that initial crediting event, it does start to get a bit wavy in terms of viability for yourself as a producer. Looking at the graph within the first 5 years, you can see the bottom dark blue little bars. Those are the costs. So you can see they're quite front-ended for those first 5 years, and that's all about getting things really up and going, doing infrastructure, doing soil ameliorants, or those kind of things to really get the carbon sequestration rate moving. And essentially those drop off over time, but that rate will keep increasing. Did you have any thoughts about that, Amanda, or anything that we should point out specifically on this graph?
No, I think you've summarised it really well, Victoria. And yes, this is sort of the big graph, as Vic said at the start of the report, and then the rest of the report really breaks down the numbers that you see in here. So where we've got those green vertical bars, that's your carbon revenue. So we're going to go into and explain, well, how do we come up with that figure? You know, where did that come from? And that is different per property. And how did you come up with the production figure? And what are these costs? So we'll break that down as the report goes. But that first top graph, it's something that when you do go through this process with Atlas Carbon, you'll keep referring back to. It is sort of, and it's quite lucrative, as you've seen with, you know, cascade, you know, upward trends of cash flow as it goes through. That's that dotted line. But those first 5 years, the focus is mainly on the costs, and then it's all blue sky from there.
I just moved through because I thought we would segue quite nicely into you talking about the breakdown of those carbon revenue versus production, and then sort of those costs that we've got broken down here.
Yes, so you can see in the case of, I can't remember his name or his property, here's a really nice gap there. When we're looking at the benefits of a cost of a carbon project on this property, you can see that there is a benefit there from both carbon production, carbon credits, and core production gain. So, you know, gross margins, kilos of beef, that's, or sheep, if you're, you know, it's not just about beef, but this is about the carbon credits aren't going to come at the cost of production. They're actually going to happen together, because by sequestering carbon, you're going to grow more grass, which means you can increase your carrying capacity over time, which means you make more money out of your core business. And that's critical. It's actually almost impossible to increase your soil carbon without raising more animals, you know, because the animal plays such an important role. So in this case, we've got a 50-50 sort of split almost in terms of the benefits. Sometimes when we run these reports, the numbers come out more that the upside is going to be more from the carbon credits, and we'll typically see that with the more advanced braziers that have done a lot of practice change already, that have really advanced infrastructure in place. In this case, huge upside on both carbon credits and production uplift, which is pretty exciting because it's about building a robust business for the next 25 years beyond just the carbon opportunity. And then in the project costs, the blue, the below the line, this is where it is a little desktop. You know, we do need to come out to farm, and as Victoria said, we will talk about that in a future webinar, but also touch on it later in this one. At this stage, when we're doing the cost benefit report, we have had some information from you as a farmer about your operation that tells us things like where you're up to with your property developments, like where you're up to with wire and water. Some people will come and say, look, I'm 90% there, and we can tell by the number of paddocks that they've got versus the number of mobs versus their size that, yeah, they're pretty developed. So there's probably not going to be a lot of farm infrastructure for those farms. Others are really early stages. You know, they've just bought the farm, or they're just starting to change the way they run it, and they know that they've got years of infrastructure development ahead of them, and they'll typically see more money allocated to farm infrastructure. Soil input and seeding, again, we don't really know until we get out there on farm, and that's where we also refine the spend on farm infrastructure. The important thing at this stage is that we're allocating money into buckets for your farm, whether that's infrastructure or whether it's inputs and seeding. It's not super important, the allocation at this stage. It's more that we're allocating spend there, that we're not hiding any of the costs of doing a soil carbon project related to the practice change additionality element. The soil carbon testing and the project administration, they're a little more identifiable at this stage. You know, there are some fixed costs there, and the report that we generate, this cost benefit report, is quite agnostic. So we're pulling out, this is, you know, whether you're doing a soil carbon project with Atlas Carbon or anyone else, there's going to be some fixed costs regarding carbon testing and project administration, which we'll break down further as we go through the report.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Just moving into this carbon credit analysis, I would like to say from the top is that we know there may be people who might want to insert their carbon credits. We will do an assessment and we'll do this analysis for your revenue based on selling them. But essentially, we need to create them first before you decide whether you want to sell them or want to inset them. But essentially, we'd like to do this analysis to look at, what is the revenue that could be from selling them. And I know that there are, some questions around, well, for example, the less government discounts you can see in here. So if we run through this table, we've done a carbon sequestration rate estimate for this property at 0.08. And so that gives us a carbon credit production rate per hectare of 2.94. So those total carbon credits produced over this 25-year project is nearly 150,000. So there is production increase. So from your increased production, there will be some credits come off that to offset that. The government discounts, there are two types. So there's one that's a 20% that's applicable for a 25-year project, because there is actually the option to do a 100-year project, which doesn't have that 20%. I don't know anyone who's doing a 100-year project at the moment. So pretty much that 20% from the government is locked in, as is another 5%, which is for all projects, whether they are 25-year or 100, for this risk of reversal buffer, which really is the government's insurance. If somebody did a 25-year carbon project and did a really good job and then sold it to a company who turned it into a car park, the government is insuring against that carbon loss then after that. So hopefully that's not the case, but that's what's all included in all these projects from that discount. Less typical developer payment. Now, as Amanda said, this is an agnostic report. This isn't Atlas Carbon's number. Generally, it's sitting around 20% commission rate in the industry. So we've factored that in this report as well. And then it gives you your total carbon credits available for sale, which ends up around $3.1 million over the 25 years. Now that is at the $37 carbon credit price. So if that changes, then obviously that number changes as well in future. Going through to the grazing metrics, again, this is sort of the important part when we're talking about Atlas being very focused on the core part of the grazing business and really helping our producers be able to optimise their grazing operation as a whole. Amanda, do you want to run through these little graphs?
Yeah, I think, and this is sort of the secret sauce of Atlas Carbon, if you will. We touched at the beginning on, our history as a business and Maya Grazing being our sister company and a big part of our heart and soul. And through that Maya Grazing database, working with some of the best graziers in the country and internationally, we know what good looks like, and we've seen how graziers have sort of moved the needle to drive production. And carbon, therefore, which is so related to production, as we spoke about earlier. So we can really benchmark where your current state is and what good looks like, what the target is, to see the upside. Now, what's exciting here when you look at, I still can't remember this farmer's name, but his current and old mate,
John Smith.
John Smith. Great name. His current and target, there's a big gap there, and that's good. It's good because there's upside, that's potential, that's more carbon that can be sequestered, that's more production uplift that's not yet realised. So we want to see when we're doing these reports, and we want to be able to provide you with that guide of where to get to. The targets can look quite overwhelming, to look at 25 paddocks per mob and this level of density and that sort of thing. But this is the stuff that we understand, and with our customers that come on the journey and go through to the farm visit and then go into a carbon project with us, this is where our customer success team work really closely with our customers to help them move the needle and get to closer to that target, which will help achieve that carbon sequestration rate, achieve those credits, and achieve those production uplifts. So we include it in the cost benefit report based on data that is provided at that survey level, we're able to do those numbers and benchmark you on where you sit on a grazing metrics perspective, to give you confidence that that production uplift figure that we've come up with isn't based on thin air and guesses. It's based on 8 years of knowledge of the grazing space and how that influences production and carbon uplift.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we wanted to show you some of these key parts of this cost benefit report. This is by no means the whole report, but we are more than happy to chat to anyone who's interested to even just ask questions or just want to talk about their property and potential for a carbon project. And you can see from our process, I think people get worried if they call us that they'll be dialing into a project straight away, and it's definitely not the case. We are really committed to going through this due diligence discovery process, or together, and really finding out where the opportunities lie, and if they are there. And I was just going to say, we've had no questions. So if anybody is sitting there right now with any question, no question too simple, too complex, well, maybe some too complex that we might have to defer, but if there are any questions there in the next couple of minutes, feel free to send them through. Otherwise, it's just we've done a brilliant job at explaining, Amanda, I think.
Might be that.
I'll quickly jump to next month. We would really like to present what actually happens on a farm visit, and I think that's important for people to understand. When we come out, when you decide that you want to look at this soil carbon project potential in a deeper sense, and have us come out and do some initial pasture samples, soil samples, and essentially it's a big consultation day, because our team will take you along for the ride. We'll show you actually how the samples are done, what the soil looks like when it comes out. And I think I've had a lot of feedback from people who have done these farm visits, and they say that was the most surprising thing, is I learned so much about my own farm that I didn't expect would happen. I just thought you guys would come out, do some samples and leave, but it really is this big day together looking at how the whole system works as a whole, and really doing a deep dive and understanding your farm better, where's your best soil, where's your less ideal soil, what does that actually look like when you're pulling it out and doing cores, and really understanding the different soil types that you've got across your property. Is that, do you think that's an accurate description, Amanda?
Oh, for sure. And look, yeah, it's an essential part of this analysis of whether you do a soil carbon project or not. It's what we've run through today, this cost benefit report. You've got to go through that to sort of understand, is it even worth going to this farm visit stage? If it's not, we'll tell you. We're not in the business of just trying to sell carbon projects to people. It's a joint success situation. So if we think this looks good, if Victoria or myself run through this cost benefit report with you and say, look, this looks good, the numbers look good, you're excited, you're keen to explore the opportunity further, this next stage is to really understand the soil, to really understand the pastures, to understand you and your business, and therefore everyone's able to move into a carbon project thereafter with the confidence that it's the right property, right soils, right everything, right management system, to really to make it a very good decision for you. So yeah, great day to get involved with a farm visit, and we're happy to chat to you about that as well through the cost benefit report process.
No worries. I've just had a question come through asking if we can do some summaries and go back to some of the points. But what I'll say is this is being recorded. So because you've registered and you've joined, you'll get a recording of this session. So you can go back in detail and have a look at any parts that you missed from the start. But that's all the questions that we've had. So if you are interested in going down this process, get in touch with us. You can go on our website. We've got a QR code coming up at the end if you just want to get your phone out and scan the QR code, and it will take you straight to our website where you can submit your expression of interest, and we'll reach out to you and be in touch. But yeah, don't hesitate. And I know if anybody is going to Beef Week, you will be there, Amanda. Do you want to go through what you're running?
Yes. So now, Victoria, you just mentioned pulling out your phone, and I would ask you, do you have an iPhone 15? Because if you are going to Beef Week, you have a chance to win a brand new, hot off the press production line iPhone 15 simply by coming to visit us. We are going to be at T19 in the Tech Yards. We're going to have a beautiful soil sample, and you just need to guess the soil organic carbon percentage to win. We'd love to see you there. Myself, I'll be there. Unfortunately, Vic's not able to come over from Perth this time, but myself, Cole Phelan, Pip Craft, Ashley Silver, our CEO. So we'd love to see you there and test your knowledge of soil organic carbon to be in for your chance to win an iPhone.
Sounds amazing. I did ask the question if I was able to enter. Seeing as I'm not going and part of the company, I feel like I'm not. So anyone else who wants to, you've got one less person to be up against, because I do not have an iPhone 15. Would love one. But thanks, Amanda. Looking forward to hearing about Beef Week. We went a few years ago. That was my first time, and yeah, I'm very jealous. It will be an amazing week for you guys. And if you are going, please go and say hello to the team in the Tech Yards. I'm sure they'll be very happy to have a chat. We have had one last question come through from Duncan asking about what's the minimum hectares you would say? And I know you said at the start it depends. We do sort of look at around that 800 hectare mark. Again, really depends on where you are and, you know, rainfall profile, soil profile, that sort of thing. Would that be fairly accurate from your side, Amanda?
Yeah, look, definitely 800 hectares of clay, great. Clay is probably your best kind of soil. If it was 800 hectares with sketchy rainfall and sketchy soil, you know, sort of your more granity, sandy soils, it's not as appealing as a clay soil. But look, it depends. Put in an EOI. It's as simple as putting in your hectares and your rainfall, and we will chat to you about whether we'll go through to this cost benefit report stage. If we can sort of see based on your region it's that the hectares and the rainfall combined are going to be just too low, we will let you know. So yeah, but 800 hectares plus, and usually sort of over 500 mils of rainfall are your good minimums to work with.
Yeah, no worries. All right, thank you so much, Amanda. Like I said, if you want to whip that phone out and scan the QR code, it'll take you straight to our contact page and you can submit that EOI. Otherwise, easy to find us on our website. But please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions and would like to talk to us. Thank you so much, Amanda, for being my co-presenter.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Have a good one.